You are listening to Small Business Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives small business owners the straight talk on productivity, time management, business systems, leading your teams, strategic decision-making, and mindset. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. Today is episode 395, Hidden Revenue Leaks, Part 2. Real businesses, real leaks, real solutions. If you're a small business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. Last week, I walked you through 5 levels of hidden revenue leaks that most business owners never address. But I know you didn't just want to know what the problem is. You want to see how this actually plays out in real businesses with real solutions. So today, I'm sharing the real stories behind the revenue leak challenges I shared last week. If you did not already go back and listen to episode 394, for this one, I think this is really good time to hit pause and head back to episode 394, then come back to this episode as it is the second part to last week's episode. Today, you're going to hear from Lauren, who discovered her morning commute had become more of an unpaid customer service hotline, Jessica, who is sabotaging her own billing process and writing off thousands in legitimate revenue, and Amy, whose operational efficiency was so good that it revealed an entirely different revenue leak. These aren't hypothetical examples. These are real coaching clients with real revenue recovery stories that will help you identify where your own business might be bleeding money. Stick around because by the end of today's episode, you'll know exactly what each level of revenue leak looks like in practice. And more importantly, you'll have the confidence to start spotting them in your own business. I want to invite you to take my next level business owner quiz. If you have not already done so, please take the next level business owner quiz. And here's why. In 3 short minutes, you are going to take a quiz that will uncover what is most holding you back from taking your business to the next level. Then you'll get a curated playlist of specific episodes from the podcast that address the challenges that you are facing right now. And in those episodes, of course, you're going to get actionable strategies you can implement immediately that will make an impact on your business. Head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz. Again, that's amberdelagarza.com/quiz. And now, let's get to the straight talk. If you caught part 1 of this series, you now understand the 5 levels of hidden revenue leaks, from the obvious pricing and boundary issues all the way down to fundamental business model mismatches that can cost you tens of thousands of dollars annually. Today, we're diving into the messy reality of how these leaks actually show up when you're running a business day to day. I'm going to walk you through the specific transformations of 4 different business owners. And then in one level, I'm going to give you examples from multiple business owners because it's a quite common level to get stuck on. You'll see exactly how each revenue leak was discovered, the resistance that came up when we started addressing it, and the sometimes surprising results when they committed to making changes. What I love about these stories is that it shows you don't need a complete business overhaul to see significant revenue recovery. Sometimes it's as simple as changing who answers the phone or getting yourself out of your own billing process. These transformations happen because business owners are willing to look beyond the surface level symptoms and address these real structural issues, creating revenue problems. The hidden cost of being always available. Let me tell you about Lauren, one of my clients. As we were working together, one of the challenges that came up was that she was working more than she would like to. Can you relate? During our coaching sessions, we decided to dig deeper. And during one of our coaching sessions, I discovered something that perfectly illustrates level 1 revenue leaks: pricing, scope, and boundary breakdowns. Lauren has a long commute to her office every morning. And one day I asked her how she wanted that drive to look and feel. And she said ideally she'd like to listen to podcasts or music, or maybe strategically think about the business, not working in the business, but rather thinking about on the business strategies. She ultimately summed it up and said, I would rather my morning commutes be something that sets me up for success. But what was she actually doing during her morning commutes? Well, she was returning phone calls and text messages, putting out fires on the job site, fielding contractor questions, and the list goes on and on. And initially, she started this because she did not have a full team. So, of course, everyone was contacting her for questions. And she also started this in a really kind of positive place of thinking, hey, anything that I can knock out on my commute is less that I have to do when I get into the office. But unfortunately, these subtle decisions and subtle habits that were created over time created her morning commute to be unpaid customer service hotline. And I want to just pull back the curtains a bit and talk about what was really happening. Because it seems innocent enough that if she's not actively working on a client project, then maybe this is the best use of her time. Lauren was absolutely tracking her time, that she was fielding these calls for her contractors, for clients and challenges, but she was billing it at her higher rate towards her flat fee, project fee. But what this requires is that she had to bill at her higher rates every single time she answered a project question that ultimately we find out her team could have handled. You see, Lauren, like yourself, is the most expensive person in her business and on her team. And she was doing things that felt like it was moving the needle forward. It was helping the projects. It was making sure that everything moves smoothly. But if we look at this through a profitability and revenue stance, she was burning through her revenue fee or her design fee at her higher billable rates. But it's not just about the higher hourly rate difference. It was causing Lauren to get into the weeds first thing in the morning. It was constantly asking her to switch between high-value strategic work, if she did have that time, and reactive problem solving, and really setting the stage to reactive problem solving throughout the day. Every contractor call put her out of revenue-generating activities and into task-level management. Lauren realized that her team members were completely capable of answering project-related questions. And when I say completely capable, what I mean is they can answer them, but even if they don't have the answer, it is actually more effective to field the question through your team members and have them come to you with the questions they can't answer than having every single question pertaining to a project funnel through you, the CEO of the company. So the first line and first strategy to shifting this was that we established clear communication chain. All project questions go to the lead team member first. If they can't resolve it, then it goes to Lauren. And these are long-term relationships. So this is not as simple as you flip a switch and suddenly they are no longer calling your cell phone. They're suddenly not reaching out to you. This is redirection, retraining, recommunicating, because you are drawing new boundaries and new lines of communication with people that most likely you have relationships for quite some time. So I don't want to paint this as a pretty little picture of like one day she just decided she's not answering questions. But that's actually what she did. She decided one day that she no longer needed to be the primary person answering all the questions. Now it's about implementation. Here's where it gets interesting. Right around the same time that we were working on this new boundary, Lauren was called for jury duty. And look, that's a call that no business owner is looking forward to because it's unexpected time off away from the business. And most think, oh my gosh, how am I going to navigate this? And also, it's really hard to plan around because you could be gone for a day, or like Lauren, you could be gone for over 2 weeks. Yes, she was called and selected, and with an undetermined amount of time running day by day, she ended up being out of the office for over 2 weeks. And during this time, she had her availability very limited. She was checking in with the team a few times a day, but she was certainly not available all the time. And guess what happened? Her team stepped up completely. They answered all the questions, kept the projects moving smoothly, and proved what we suspected all along. They were more than capable of handling the situations. When Lauren returned, both the contractors and Lauren herself saw that things had run smoothly without her constant availability. Now, the key here is this was such a great opportunity to not slip back into old habits and patterns. And she didn't. By implementing this boundary, Lauren recovered hours of high-value time daily. Now, while we were initially focusing on changing her drive time habits, she ended up changing much more. When Lauren stopped fielding all of the questions from the job site and the contractors and the vendors during her commute into the office, she wasn't just protecting her morning drive time, she was breaking the pattern of constant interruptions throughout her entire workday. Those contractors who used to call her directly during her commute were also the ones that were interrupting her during business hours with questions her team could handle. And also anyone else that she was able to redraw this boundary with, such as her clients, and identifying who they direct questions to. Instead of billing the project at the higher rates for answering routine questions, her team handled them at their lower billable rates, which is absolutely appropriate for the level of support that is needed to answer these types of questions. But more importantly, Lauren could stay focused on business development, strategic planning, and other activities that actually grew her business rather than just maintained it. This is such a great example of looking at solving one challenge in the business and identifying that if that challenge is fixed, it actually has a rippling effect in many other areas of the business. And for today's example, it definitely had a rippling effect on her profitability because her margins were better on her flat fee design. This level 1 revenue leak recovery is about stopping the pattern of doing lower value work at higher value rates. And by doing so, it's going to allow you to stay in your zone of highest value activities that contribute the most to the business. So, what is Lauren doing in her morning commutes? I hope she's jamming out to music. I hope she's listening to podcasts like this one that is an investment in her personal and professional development. Perhaps she's driving in her commute and thinking about how she can solve bigger problems and challenges in the business than being reactive and putting out little task-related challenges that are showing up because of the projects that her company runs. This is allowing her to have the time and space to level up and think bigger, come into the office not stressed, and enjoy her commute. That's Lauren's story. Now, let me share with you what happened with another client, Jessica, who had a completely different type of revenue leak. Jessica's story perfectly illustrates level 2 revenue leaks, time tracking, and billing gaps, but with a twist you may not expect. Jessica had a solid system in place. Her team tracked their time. She tracked her time. And once a month, she'd pull the reports to create client invoices. Everything was being tracked properly. So I bet you're wondering, where was the revenue leak in that plan? Well, here's what Jessica's monthly billing routine looked like. She'd sit down with all the time reports and start agonizing. And I bet you can relate. She's thinking things like, oh, maybe her clients, are not going to like that number. Or maybe they're going to think that's too much. Or maybe we spent too much time on this or that. And the questioning begins over and over, trying to think about what your clients may or may not be thinking regarding the invoicing. She would agonize every entry, making what seemed like small edits, changing 2.5 hours to 2 hours, wiping out an entire 3-hour meeting thinking it's just one meeting. Lots of rationalizing because she was hitting some imaginary target number, either for the whole invoice or per item. In the meantime, these felt like small adjustments, and I would bet that you are doing this now in your business, and we can rationalize small adjustments for sure. But Jessica was systematically writing off thousands of dollars of legitimately tracked billable work every single month. You see, when we think it's small adjustments, but we're not tracking it, we don't actually know what the true cost of these little edits are. Jessica had recently hired a highly capable executive assistant. Initially, she was just looking at delegating for efficiency. That was the surface level challenge that she was looking to solve for. And she was doing that by thinking, can my EA take this off my plate so that Jessica can focus on higher value work? This is great questions to be asking. She's going in the right direction. And so based on the motivation of wanting to delegate, create more efficiency, take more off of her own plate, she decided to move all billing and invoicing to her executive assistant. But what happened next was pure magic. Jessica's executive assistant approached billing completely differently than Jessica. You see, her mindset was simply, my job is to send the invoices. I'm going to send the invoices. That was as simple as it was. There was no more agonizing, no more second guessing, no more editing hours down to make them quote unquote look better. She grabbed the reports, reviewed the invoicing, and sent it off to the clients. And you know what? The clients paid. Yes, they just paid. There wasn't this extra mental labor of bringing prices down or worrying about how clients would process the invoices. The executive assistant treated it like the business transaction it was supposed to be. This simple delegation had thousands of dollars of impact on Jessica's revenue line, directly affecting her profitability. What seemed like quote unquote small changes in the moment, writing off 30 minutes here, 3 hours there, was actually creating a massive compound effect on her bottom line. This happens with client after client over the years of me coaching. The negotiating, the agonizing, the trying to get in your client's head. For Jessica, the solution was simply getting herself out of the way through delegation. For other clients who insist that they need to write off the hours, I have them log and track those hours written off for a couple months. And after seeing the actual data, those little edits, And seeing those compound through just black and white data because now you're tracking all that written off time, you're objectively looking at all those hours between a legitimately tracked time and what was actually billed. This is incredibly powerful for a mindset shift that happens and often quickly after you objectively are looking at the data. So to be really clear here, the data is if you are writing hours off, do not let them just poof and they're they're just gone. They just disappeared. I want you to write them off if necessary and track how many hours are written off. My clients realize, oh my gosh, this isn't just a little write-off. This is having a huge compound effect on my revenue and profitability. For this revenue leak, I want you to stop being your own worst enemy when it comes to billing, which you've actually earned. And if you want the full story and to go behind the scenes on how Jessica has transformed her entire business, you can check out episode 257, Creating Freedom with Structure, a client case study with Jessica Risco-Smith. Jessica's billing story shows us how mindset can sabotage our revenue. But sometimes the issue goes even deeper to not actually knowing what it takes to deliver your services. This next story I'm going to share with you highlights when you don't actually know what you're selling. I have a current client who is an interior designer, and her story perfectly illustrates level 3 revenue leaks, the service delivery blind spot. This is when business owners think that they know what it takes to deliver their service, but they're essentially guessing every time when they price a project. When I started working with her, I noticed a concerning pattern on her profit and loss statement. She was delivering services at a flat fee, but way more hours were being accounted for on projects than she had initially anticipated. This was happening over and over again. I suspected it was ultimately about pricing, but the real issue was deeper. She didn't actually know what she was selling. Here's what I had her do. Instead of just tracking her time, we started with documenting every single step that it takes to deliver her services. We created a Google Sheet and broke her processes down into phases, then identified what gets delivered in each phase, and finally backed that into all the action steps it takes for each delivery. In this example, just merely tracking your time only tells you a bit of the story. All it's going to do is tell you that you're taking longer than you had quoted, or it's taking you more hours than you had thought it was going to take when you made the proposal. That's not enough information. We need to understand what exactly is not being accounted for when more time is needed. What we were looking for was for a chronological project task list from beginning to end that includes everything she actually does to service her clients. And if you are listening to this example, you might be totally seeing yourself in this example. And I'm guessing so because I do see this so often. It is so easy to have these blind spots of not truly understanding everything that it takes. And oftentimes it comes from a place, again, of being optimistic, of saying, it takes this, this, and this to deliver the service, but time and time again, it proves to not be true. And if we're not tracking the information, our time, if we don't understand and track the processes, we don't actually know where that gap is. This wasn't just about time tracking for this client. This was about creating objective data about her own service delivery process. She's right in the middle of the process now, but what she discovered so far is that far more goes into delivering her services than she ever anticipated. And here's the irony. She was already doing all of this work. Always, she delivers these services at such a high level. And as a team of one, she knew she was really busy. She knew that it took so much work to get these projects to the finish line. But it's such an abstract thing when we're trying to quantify time or remember what we actually did. Imagine me asking you, what did you do yesterday? No, for real, I'm going to ask you right now, what did you do yesterday? Or what did you do last week? It's often not an accurate picture if we were to answer those questions if we're not documenting it and turning it into objective data. This documentation process ultimately helps with pricing confidence because business owners finally see exactly what actually goes into their work. Oftentimes, we think we need to justify our pricing to the client, but more often than not, what I see is that we first need to quote unquote justify the pricing to ourselves by understanding how hard we work and what it actually takes to deliver our services. And my hope is that you move away from that thinking altogether and start seeing your pricing through the lens of value. I want you to see your price exchange, what you're charging for an exchange in value, not necessarily time that it takes. I want you to shift that thinking so that it's not always just time for money. When you can objectively see what it takes to deliver your services at the level you're delivering it, you become more confident knowing that if a client asks a question about why does it cost this much, why are you charging me X, Y, and Z, you can tell them exactly what goes into their projects. The most eye-opening discovery that she's made about her own service delivery, she delivers a high level of service to her clients, and her pricing isn't in alignment with that value she's delivering. Remember from part 1, no matter what your service is, you're always selling time. When business owners charge flat rates but don't understand what it actually takes to complete the deliverable, they impact their proposals, their client agreements, and ultimately end up writing off hours because more time is being invested than initially thought. I just want to recap that for a minute. Whether your flat rate, it's going to take X to deliver this service, or you charge hourly, and oftentimes when we charge hourly, it's not open-ended. I think it's going to take 20 hours. I think it's going to take 40 hours. I think it's going to take 60 hours. And what happens is that if you go over the proposed hours, it ultimately turns into flat fee because most business owners are writing off that time when they inaccurately estimated how long it would take to deliver the service. Now, this happens because business owners are so optimistic about what they can actually get done. When you're pricing flat rate services, you're not thinking of your services as hourly, but every deliverable still requires your time to create. The revenue leak recovery here is exactly what my client is right in the middle of discovering through objective data. But what I need you to know is that you need to understand what it actually takes to deliver your services so that you can price it appropriately and deliver it profitably. The business owners who take time to document their real processes, not the ones they think they should be, but what it actually takes to deliver the services, they stop guessing at pricing and start charging based on the actual value they deliver. Understanding what goes into your service delivery is foundational work. But here's another layer of operational challenges that affect how effectively you can actually deliver those services. And this next example, we're going to call the hidden costs of that's just how we do things. Here's what I've learned after years of coaching. Level 4 revenue leaks, operational efficiencies that drain profits, are everywhere in small businesses. And the frustrating part, most business owners know their processes aren't perfect, but they don't realize how much money these inefficiencies are actually costing them. In fact, these aren't often really that hidden, but they seem so simple. They seem so little. And oftentimes, by stop asking the question of how can we do this better, and instead just rationalizing it as, that's just how we do it. These are not just isolated problems. They're stacked and integrated challenges that compound each other throughout your entire business. When I start working with a new client and we dive into the details of how the business operates, I can usually spot operational efficiencies right away. Let me walk you through the 3 patterns I see most often and how they're bleeding revenue. Number 1, process inefficiencies. This is when your company doesn't have documented, repeatable processes for routine tasks. Think, no SOPs, no checklists, no videos training new team members that are coming on board on how things are actually done. Here's how this shows up. Perhaps you or your team member are hunting for contracts or templates, or worse yet, perhaps you don't have templates for things that you are creating all the time in your business, like recreating proposals from scratch because no one saved the best last version. How about onboarding new clients differently every single time? Or onboarding them differently because you don't quite know what all the steps are because they're not documented. Even the inefficiency of slowing down to remember what happens next and then next and then next to onboard a new client is creating inefficiencies that a checklist can absolutely fix. How about spending meetings explaining the same procedures or processes or requesting the same type of tasks from your team over and over again because they're not written down anywhere? There's no project management system that is automatically assigning tasks as the project flows through or as the service delivery flows through from A to Z. How about your team asking you the same questions repeatedly because, again, there's no SOPs? Invoicing takes twice as long as it should because the process changes, wait for it, depending on who's getting invoiced. Every client has a different exception to the rule, which really creates more efficiency in the business and costing you money. How about new hires taking months to get up to speed because everything that they need to know is in your head? There's not a proper onboarding of your own team members to get them up to speed so that the business can operate in a more efficient way. Next, pattern number 2, communication chaos. This happens when information lives in too many places and no one knows where to find what they need. Or the other extreme of this is all the information lives in your head, the business owner, and your team cannot access it because you're holding on to important information that would allow them to do their jobs more effectively and more efficiently. You'll see this when client communications are scattered across emails, text messages, Slack, phone calls, with no central way of communicating with your company. Think about it. How many ways are your either potential clients or clients reaching out to you? Do you need to be checking your DMs and messages on social media, and some are texting your cell phone and some are calling the office and others are emailing? Just corralling that and having a policy around how you prefer your clients to reach out to you and contact you can create more efficiency and definitely less stress. How about communication around actual files being saved, documentation? So I want you to think about the organizational structure in where much of information is saved about a client and or project. And what does your Google Drive look like? What does your Dropbox look like? How are documents and information shared in a way that everybody knows what the current version of the document is and where updates are kept? By not having digital organization on how your files and documentation are saved, you're definitely creating more resistance and thus inefficiencies in accessing this information across your entire company. How about team members constantly interrupting you, asking you questions because, again, all the information is living in your head and they need that information from you, but there's no actual consistent way in which information is delivered to your team, whether that's a team meeting or it's one-on-one meetings. Another really good example that I see often is this, advice that's given out there. I see it over and over again. It's well-intended, but completely inefficient. If you're having a team project meeting where you're reviewing all the projects on deck with your entire team so that everyone knows what to do for the rest of the week, it's been said to do that on Mondays, right? Monday mornings, have your project meeting and the team knows exactly what they need to do for the rest of the week. And then there's this other bit of advice, and while it's good, I think it falls short in when does this actually happen, is to communicate with your clients an update on the projects. When you can communicate consistently project updates to the clients, it reduces the amount of inbound phone calls and emails that are not in an ideal time, and then you're kind of seeding out or spreading out the information to your clients haphazardly instead of systematically. So, great intention. But oftentimes I see that is happening on a Friday, right? A weekly wrap-up email that goes to the client. But here's the irony. That means in 5 days, every single project is being touched for review purposes twice. And from the time that the wrap-up emails are being sent to the client on a Friday, what actually has happened or changed by the next Monday if you're not working weekends? By simply shifting, and I do give this exact advice to my clients, by shifting your project meeting overview where everyone's giving updates, getting updates, you're setting the stage for what is going to happen that week, you inevitably have to cover what has already happened. So those emails or any way that you're updating a system or a portal or wherever your clients are getting updates through should be updated at the same time so that you only have to touch your projects in that way once, because that information is already right at your fingertips when you're doing a project review. So by simply cutting out the client updates on a Friday and moving them to a Monday, you have now created far more efficiency by not touching the same thing more than one time and multiplying that by all your team members. Now, take this advice with a grain of salt. Team meetings don't actually have to be on a Monday. You just have to have these team project meetings to where you're forecasting out an entire week. So maybe the cadence and the flow works better on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and you go Wednesday to Wednesday. The date doesn't matter, but by reducing the quantity of times you're touching the same information will create more efficiency with your communication. Pattern number 3 is all about approval bottlenecks. This is when you have become the single point of failure for routine decisions. It looks like every invoice sitting in your email waiting for your review before it goes out. It looks like team members unable to respond to basic questions because they need to check it off with you first or run it by you. A simple solution to this is routine expenses under $100 maybe don't need to require your approval. Your team waiting days for you to sign off on work or doing work review is absolutely creating a bottleneck of inefficiencies because you're putting yourself in the center and most oftentimes not allocating adequate enough time to respond when you're putting yourself in the middle. This shows up when you think, yeah, I'll review it and get back to my team when I can. But now you have all your team members waiting for you, which is creating stress. And so sometimes you're either going to leapfrog and just throw in these reviews and approvals when you should be doing other high value work because your brain says, and I get it, man, I can't hold up the team. So let me just respond to this. Let me respond to this. Let me unbottleneck it. Well, what is the underlying challenge? Why are you bottlenecking it? Is your team not adequately trained? Do you not trust your team member for some reason that needs to be addressed? And if those are not the challenges, those are just a couple examples, then perhaps you don't have the adequate amount of time actually allocated for reviewing work on a consistent basis. So it's always sabotaging that higher value work that actually moves the needle and grows the business. If operational inefficiencies add just 1 hour to your business operations daily, that's 260 hours annually. Now, just adding 1 hour a day, if you have a team of 4, is just 15 minutes of inefficiencies. And I just gave you broad strokes over the top inefficiencies in our processes. But most of those inefficiencies I shared with you are happening over and over again in the business. So, going back to my example, just 1 hour in your business daily, that's 260 hours annually. Assuming $150 an hour, these inefficiencies are costing your business $39,000 in lost productivity. But it actually gets worse because inefficient processes also create errors that require reworking, which is more time, delays that frustrate clients, thus affects return clients, referral clients. It frustrates the team and leads to more turnover with your team and just overall lack of enjoying their jobs. When your team is frustrated, they're not showing up their best and wanting to be committed to high excellence. These errors or inefficiencies rather create missed opportunities because you are so busy always putting out fires. You cannot see what is in front of you or opportunities that land in your lap. You're already at capacity. Your team is at capacity because of these inefficiencies. You can't grab opportunities when they're right in front of you. And I already referenced this one slightly, but I think it's worth highlighting again, is that ultimately, because you're running an inefficient system, you're going to have less referrals, less repeat clients due to poor experience. And that is directly affecting your revenue, thus profitability. And these examples that I just shared with you represent many, many of my clients over the years, and I think maybe your business as well. Because as your business grows and develops over time, what happens is something that I call the Frankenstein process. This is when systems are stitched together over time and they are no longer efficient. This means that you had a system, something needed to get fixed, so you tweaked part of it, but not all of it. And then maybe new tech came in, or maybe you even had to add people to your team. Because the processes that once worked as a team of one are certainly not scaling exactly the same for your new team growth. And so what you get are pieces of a process that are looked at individually sectioned off, but not the whole process together to optimize efficiency. The truth is, most business owners are so busy working in the business that they hardly ever step back to work on the business and fix these foundational inefficiencies. The revenue leak recovery that we're looking for in this level is systematically identifying and streamlining the processes that make everything else in your business take longer than they should. The businesses that invest time in documenting processes, integrating tools, and creating efficient workflows, well, they're not just saving time, they're creating scalable systems that allow them to grow without proportionately increasing their operational costs. And I just want to share one more note here about operational inefficiencies. In the previous level, we were talking about writing hours off. And I see these two, level 2 and 3, go hand in hand because some of the rationale of writing, quote unquote, writing hours off or not billing the client is usually chalked up to known inefficiencies, saying this thing should have taken X time, it took X, Y time. I can't justify actually charging the client. And I totally get that. And I understand why you are not charging the client. But you are just putting a Band-Aid on it by writing that time off. It would be far more beneficial and actually fixing the revenue leak of correcting those inefficiencies, because compounded over and over again, what is the cost of writing those hours off, even if in your mind and ethically, you're legitimately writing the time off because it should take less time? Then go fix those inefficiencies so that you can bill for actual time that it took to deliver your services. Now, next, I'm going to tell you about Amy. Her situation was unlike anything I had seen before, and in such a good way. Amy is a residential interior designer in Portland, and her story perfectly illustrates the deepest level of revenue leaks. Level 5, the business model delivery mismatch. Amy's situation was unique because the solution was so clear, which is something that I don't often see. Amy came to me with something I rarely see: incredible operational efficiency. I'm talking top-notch, well-documented, not just systems. So imagine she knows exactly all the steps it takes to deliver the services. She's tracking all of her time. She's got past data. She knows what it takes to deliver her services. She has documented these processes for herself and her team, detailed workflows for how she delivers her services, and she had years and years of organized data by project type. This is really important because she was able to slice this data to tell all different scenarios and stories. Now, most of my clients are still working on operational efficiencies, but Amy had already mastered it. She was diligent about time tracking down to the 5-minute increments. She had created spreadsheets analyzing what she estimated versus what it actually took and she actually billed for. And because she was running so operationally efficient with all her processes documented, I was able to quickly see an opportunity that she couldn't see for herself. For years, Amy had been billing hourly for design work. When she created proposals, she gave clients a low estimate and a high estimate. So she was giving them a range of how many hours it was going to take to finish the project, and this was all based off of historical data. But here's what we discovered when analyzing her spreadsheets. She was consistently coming in at the low estimate and sometimes even lower than the low estimate. Project after project, Amy was leaving substantial money on the table. Why? Because she was being penalized for being so efficient. Her clients had already signed a contract agreeing that the project could potentially cost the higher number. But because Amy and her team were so good at what they did, they never hit the higher amount. When we looked at the revenue difference of over almost 2 years, it was substantial money that had been left on the table. Now, here's what Amy was dealing with. She had a number of billable hours in the back of her mind that she had to hit every single day to reach her revenue goals. Like her as the principal designer, but also as her team, she had this number that she knew had to be a work that was working on client work each day to hit her revenue goals. And it was a lot of billable hours in a day. And the pressure was intense. In fact, she was filtering most business decisions, her entire schedule, whether she took time off, whether she took vacation, all through the lens of, is she going to hit her target billable hours? And she felt completely de-incentivized to work on her business because every minute spent on strategic work meant she wasn't billing. If she had a day where she spent more hours working on the business, those billable hours had to be made up another day. And as she put it just takes so many more projects to get to a higher revenue number when you're billing hourly. Here's what I asked Amy. I said, if your clients have already agreed to the potential higher number, would you be willing to go flat rate at the higher price? That was it. That was my question. After looking at the data, understanding how this was impacting her experience of being a business owner, how it was impacting plateauing her revenue, thus profitability, I asked her, if your clients have already agreed to the potentially paying this higher number, would you be willing to go flat rate at the higher price? Now, I positioned the question in that way because I'm not actually asking her to raise her rates. I'm not asking her to present a number that she's uncomfortable with because she's been presenting that number. She has data to show the clients are sign. She had an open checkbook of going up to that number to complete the project and the deliverables, but she was never going that high. She sat on this decision for about 4 to 6 weeks, and rightfully so. What I was asking her, while it seems like a simple question, I was asking her to flip her business model upside down and change everything of how she was looking at her business. She had been selling hourly for 9 years. She needed to work through how to sell flat rate pricing and whether she felt confident having those conversations with potential clients. But I'll tell you what, once she made the decision, the relief was immediate. Amy made this shift and the weight came off her shoulders immediately. It was incredible. It changed the filter in which she saw every decision of her business. In fact, she said, quote, "We are not going backwards," because it instantly felt like a huge amount of pressure was removed. And her saying, "We are not going backwards to the old model," was me asking her, how is it working? Because one of the things that I use with my clients is that when we're getting ready to make big decisions, or in fact, we are making big decisions, I walk through the scenario of, if you were to make this decision and unmake the decision, how does that feel for you? Like, if we're not looking at this decision through the lens of it's permanent and you could walk this back, meaning there's no way you're going to tank your business. There's no way that this one decision is going to break everything, because worst case scenario is we go back to what it was previously. And I am happy to report she said, absolutely no way am I walking this decision back. For the first time, it was truly okay to be running such an efficient process. You see, she now is being rewarded by knowing exactly what it takes to deliver her services, by running efficiently, by having boundaries, understanding her scope, by having all of the previous levels really nailed down. This was her payment by just flipping her business model. She got to experience the enjoyment and the return on investment of all of that efficiency work that she had done in the previous years. She didn't have to, think about in the back of her mind every day is like, well, that was great, but I need to get back to my billable hours. She actually gets to fill her work with more of the things that are bringing her joy of working on her business, strategic thinking, creating new offerings, which she has created, So much has come out of the product of she's making more money, working less, and gets to reclaim that time for personal time, her personal health, and reclaim it to what's next for the business. Amy gained the freedom from billable hourly guilt. Do you have billable hourly guilt? That's a real thing. When we looked at her time tracking a few months later, her billables versus non-billable hours had completely inversed. She went from primarily being focused on billable client work to spending the majority of her time working on her business. Again, strategic planning, marketing, leading her team, creating the next offering. Could you imagine flipping working in your business to going to work on your business and the impact that would have on the growth? She discovered she actually really enjoys working on the business. And she no longer felt that pressure to hit X number of billable hours each day or each week. So why this solution was so clear and when it usually isn't. What made Amy's situation unique wasn't the business model delivery mismatch. I see that all the time. What I don't often see is such a clear path from hourly to flat rate, because most business owners do not have the operational foundation that Amy had built. She could make this shift confidently because she had years of documented data and proven efficient processes. She knew exactly what it took to deliver her services and had the track record to prove it. The compound effect? This change didn't just increase Amy's profitability. It freed her up to work more strategically on her business, and because she invested time in that strategic work, it ultimately increased her business revenue and profitability even more. The level 5 revenue leak recovery that we are looking to do in level 5 is aligning your business model with your operational reality so efficiency gets rewarded instead of penalized. The businesses that reach this level, they stop trading time for money and start getting paid for the value they consistently deliver. And if you want to hear more about Amy's transformation, her story, and how she has made these changes in her business, I want you to go check out, and we'll link out to this as well, episode 369, Life Beyond Survival Mode, a client case study with Amy Pearson. We have covered 5 different ways that revenue leaks show up in real businesses, and I hope that these stories help you see your own business differently. Lauren recovered hours of high-value time by establishing clear communication boundaries. Jessica recovered thousands in revenue by getting out of her own way during billing. My current interior design client is discovering that her pricing isn't aligned with the actual value that she's delivering. The operational inefficiencies that we talked about can cost businesses tens and tens of thousands of dollars because these inefficiencies just compound at such a quick rate. It affects lost productivity and profitability. And Amy was able to flip her entire business model to reward efficiency instead of penalize it. What I want you to take away from these stories is this. These revenue leaks are costing you more than you realize, but they're also more fixable than you think. Burying your head, being ignorant to them of I don't know, what I don't know won't hurt me, putting your head in the sand, any of these sayings is not serving you because you are working far harder than you need to if you're not taking the time to invest in actually repairing these revenue leaks. The business owners who systematically address these issues don't just recover lost revenue. They create sustainability, profitable businesses that can support the life they actually want to live. Remember, you may not have a revenue problem. You have a revenue retention problem. And retention problems can be solved. These client stories show that revenue recovery isn't just possible, it happens right now for business owners who are willing to look deeper than surface level solutions. I have loved having you listen to this episode of the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. And I sure hope you found today's real stories with real business owners with real solutions to be valuable. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So, what I think would be super helpful for you right now is for you to think through these 5 client stories and identify which one resonates most with your current business situation. I do not want you to try and tackle everything at once. That never is actually helpful. I want you to pick the one level where you think, yeah, that sounds like my business. That sounds like where maybe the largest revenue leak is. Or maybe you're going to say, that's where there is a revenue leak that I know exactly how to solve for. And that's the one you want to start with. Start. That's the key. Take one small step this week and start addressing specific revenue leaks. And if you are listening to this 2-part series and thinking, oh my gosh, I absolutely have a revenue leak. I don't know where to look. I need someone that can help me see this from a neutral outside perspective. Someone that has this experience of being able to see things that often are not seen by the business owner who's in the business every day. I would love to talk to you. This is exactly how I partner with my clients through both coaching and being a strategy partner and strategizing where them investing their time to repair leaks such as these revenue leaks will have the highest impact and ROI and make the biggest difference in their businesses. If you are looking for a partner, a strategy partner, and a business coach that can help you navigate these types of challenges, then I think we should chat. To learn more about my coaching services and to book a discovery call, head on over to amberdelagarza.com/coaching. Again, that's amberdelagarza.com/coaching. I would love to talk to you. And if you are new here and this is your first time tuning in, be sure you hit subscribe so you do not miss another episode. And if you've enjoyed this 2-part series about revenue leaks, I would love for you to share it with a fellow business owner who you think would find value from these episodes. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.